Okay, so this is week 11 for pop culture. And today's topic is going to be about the Paralympics.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about what is Paralympics. As you might know, we've talked about what is Olympics for Tokyo 2020. So for Paralympics, this is a major international sports competition for athletes with disabilities that are associated with and held following the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. The time for Paralympics is begin on Tuesday, August 20th, 2021, and ends on Sunday, September 5th. The purpose of Paralympics is serve humanity. And the sports that Paralympics have, including archery, badminton, basketball, boccia, cycling, and equestrian. And also there are some other types of sports as well. And now I'm gonna compare the difference between the Special Olympics and Paralympics. So what is Special Olympics? It is an international organization dedicated to empowering individuals with intellectual disabilities to become physically fit, productive, and respected members of society through sports training and competition. So what are some differences between Paralympics and Special Olympics? So the first one is that the Special Olympics is for individuals with intellectual disabilities, whereas the Paralympics is generally for athletes with any disability, including physical. And another thing is that the training criteria and the philosophy under which the athletes complete are different. And also the structures of the individual organizations are different as well. Finally, they are similar in that they both focus on sport for athletes with a disability and are run by international non-profit organizations, which is the International Olympic Committee.
Okay, so the Tokyo 2021 Paralympics are postponed to 2021, just like the Olympics, but it's still named Tokyo 20 Paralympics, and it's 539 events across 22 sports. And the new sports are, okay. The new sports are badminton and taekwondo, and it's replacing sailing and 7-a-side football. And then there are 4.4 thousand athletes that are expected to participate in the Paralympics, which is 11.1 for Olympics. 11.1 thousand for Olympics. So the Chicago Duck Derby race is the most well-known event for the Paralympics, and it is when yellow ducks are dropped into the Chicago River for the Duck Derby race. And this year there were 70,000 ducks racing. So one duck was $5 and 6 ducks were $25. And it would go up in prices as you buy more ducks. In 2021, they raised $310,314, and the event was hosted on August 5th, 2021. So it's a signature fundraising event for the Paralympics, as I said before, and the race to the finish line had a bunch of amazing prizes. So the first place would have a 2021 Chevy Trailblazer. The second place would have a trip to Mexico. The third place was a $2,000 cash reward, and fourth place was a Chicago day getaway.
Okay, some accommodations for the Paralympics. So the first one was categories for disabilities. So different disabilities are put into different categories. Each sport has a separate race for each type of disability, so everything's fair. For example, T11 is the code name for vision impairment, and T40 is code for having a short stature. So these codes basically just make everything fair. And the Paralympians also had assistants to help them. Some had helped them with like normal living ways, like guiding them if they're blind or helping them push their wheelchair. And sometimes assistants also were needed during the races. And for example, the uh, T11 would is like when the assistants would run with the Paralympian. Next slide, please.
So now, obviously you guys know that COVID is going on right now. So there's going to be many challenges with the Paralympics. So as the world continues to battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, so a lot of uncertain things going on. Most of the sport events have been suspended, and athletes are unsure when the normal time will be restored and when the sporting action will begin again. And there are not as many, but however, there's not as many restrictions as there are before. So most likely they're going to return to para sport. The International Paralympic Committee has created this resource of relevant COVID-19 information and has also created a sport guidelines for everybody. Para athletes, support staff, NPCs, and IFs, however, are still required to practice basic COVID-19 rules, such as social distancing and 6 feet apart when they are not performing, and to wear a mask.
Okay, sitting volleyball. So although it's very similar to traditional volleyball, there's a major difference in this Paralympic sport. Only sitting is allowed. The same rules still apply, like the ball can't touch the ground and must go over the net. However, the court is smaller since there isn't much room for players to move since they're sitting. So sitting volleyball started as a form of rehabilitation, which means like healing for injured soldiers when they were fighting in a war. It became popular for people who had walking disabilities, which means like, they couldn't walk properly. And eventually in 1980, sitting volleyball was introduced as a new Paralympic sport. This year in the 2021 Tokyo Paralympics, there are a multitude of different countries competing in the men's and women's Paralympic sitting volleyball games, which will start August 24th. That's in like a couple days from now. These countries range from Rwanda to the United States to Iran. There are 2 gold medal events and 8 event competitions.
So there's another sport called wheelchair basketball. The rules are similar to real basketball. Okay. Free throws are 1 point, field point is 2 points, 3-pointer is 3 points. Player may wheelchair and bounce the ball simultaneously. If they put it in their lap, he or she is only allowed to push it two times before shooting or passing or dribbling. There are no travel violations, and you must be seated in the wheelchair. Okay.
Okay, I think that's the last slide. Or my screen is frozen. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, you guys.
Okay, do you guys have any other question? any of the question, you can feel free to put that in the chat and our tutor will answer them. So in 3 minutes, you all can take 3-minute break and the history group will start. Come back at, sorry, let me check the time. Yeah, come back at 8:20.
Hello, everybody. So we are going to be starting history soon. Okay, so welcome to this week of history. The topic for this week is the three kingdoms to the Sui dynasty for ancient China. This is the fourth lesson in the ancient China series, and this is probably the last lesson in this unit. Here are the teaching plans. Here's check out our YouTube channel if you're interested in the previous units. And here's the brief timeline of China again. Today we are going from 220 AD, which is the Three Kingdoms period, all the way to 589 AD, which is when the Sui dynasty began. Okay, we are again going to begin with some famous stories from this time period.
So as we are going to talk about Three Kingdom, which follows the Han Dynasty, there are a lot of very interesting stories in the Kingdom period. So the first one is three visits to the thatched cottage. So it means it basically means so cottage basically means little house, and thatched means like a house made up of straws or grass. Um, so after they had become sworn brothers, Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei made concerted efforts to restore the Han dynasty. but they felt that it would be impossible to do it without the help of a smart advisor. The Liu Guanzhang aliens later won one battle after another thanks to the advice of Xu Shu. But after long, Xu Shu had to surrender to the opposing camp of Cao Cao in order to save the life of his mom, who was abducted by the Cao troops. Before he left, um, Xu Shu recommended Zhuge Liang to the brothers. Accompanied by Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, Liu Bei went to Wolong Hill in Longzhong in the hope of inviting Zhuge Liang to be the military advisor. But Zhuge's servant says the mentor left in the morning. Liu Bei asked the servant to forward to Zhuge Liang his message that the brothers had come to visit him. After that, Liu rode his horse away, returning home sullenly. A few days later, when he learned that Zhuge Liang was at home, um, Liu Bei went for another visit along with Guan Yu and Zhang Fei. The servant says the servant said the mentor is reading books at his thatched cottage. Liu requested to see him. When they learned that one reading books that one reading books that at such cottage was not Zhuge Liang himself but his brother Zhuge Jun, the Liu Guanzhang brothers left a letter to express their admiration, and they braved heavy snows to return home. So there are some unfamiliar words we need to look at. So first, we can look at the word solemnly, which is used in the sentence returning home solemnly, which basically means that not really happy, which is concerned. Uh, and then the word abducted. Xu Shu's mother was abducted by the Cao troops. Abduct means the similar to kidnap, which is to like force someone to stay on your side and kind of ask for things to the one's relatives. And then concerted, which is bolded. The concerted efforts means the efforts made by people together. Um, and the and the word sworn brothers means they have swear to be brothers forever. So sworn is actually a tense, a present completed tense, um, present perfect tense for the word swear. So we can continue to the next slide. So not long after Liu Guanzhang returned to their barracks at Xinye, Liu Bei wanted to visit Zhuge Liang's thatched cottage once more. But Guan Yu dissuaded Liu from going by saying that perhaps Zhuge Liang wasn't as smart as expected and he was simply dodging the visiting brothers for that. Zhang Fei said, "You don't go. Um, I'll tie him up and force him to come and see you instead." Liu Bei lost no time in telling his brothers the story of King Wen, bent on visiting one of his subjects called Jiang Ziya. Uh, so this is actually a story that shows really great respect to the one they were visiting. Liu, Guan, and Zhang, therefore, they paid a third visit to Wolong Hill. They had no sooner arrived than um, the servant said the mentor is sleeping. Liu Bei waited until Zhuge Liang was awake and dressed. Finally, he consented to see the brothers. Liu Bei paid 3 visits to the thatched cottage without complaint. He finally succeeded in inviting Zhuge Liang to be his military advisor and to help the brothers in their cause. Liu Bei, the king of Shu, he claimed to revive the lineage of Han. Liu treats people with perseverance and considers all his subordinates as his friends. Zhang Fei and Guan Yu are his 2 best friends and also his 2 best generals. He trusts Zhuge so much that he even wanted to pass the throne to Zhuge, not his son Liu Shan. And Zhuge Liang, as genius politician, militarist, writer, inventor, and later the military advisor of Shu, Zhuge was deeply moved by the sincerity shown by Liu Bei in this story. So later he joined Shu. He invented combing lantern, combing lock, and modified the crossbow, and a lot of other inventions. Combing lock um, and the crossbow can shoot 10 arrows at once. Zhuge Liang also deduced the art of war and made 8 deployments graph. So we can see some of the most famous inventions of Zhuge Liang. The first is combing lock. It is also known as bird puzzle in Western culture. Uh, a bird puzzle is an interlocking puzzle consisting of notched sticks combined to make one three-dimensional, usually symmetrical unit. The fun fact is that the president of China used to send this toy as a gift to Germany's President Merkel, and she definitely liked it. Um, and then the second invention is Zhuge crossbow. It can fire 10 arrows at once, so it has strong firepower. But its volume and weight are too large to be used by individual soldiers. So it is mainly used to defend the cities and barracks. So barracks is the house of the soldiers. It's where they live. So the final and the third invention is the combing lantern. In ancient times, combing lanterns were mostly used for military purposes, but modern people put combing lanterns for praying. Men, women, and children write down their wishes with their own hands, symbolizing harvest, success, and happiness every year. The second story is borrowing arrows with such bolts. This is an interesting story from the Three Kingdoms period in ancient China. When the Shu and Wu kingdoms joined together to fight against the Wei kingdom, Zhou Yu, the chief military commander of the Wu kingdom, was so jealous of Zhuge's wisdom that he ordered Zhuge, um, and he said, "We are going to fight Cao troop. What is the best weapon for water warfare?" Zhuge said, "Bows and arrows are the best." So Zhou Yu said, "Yes, sir, just as I thought. No, the army is short of arrows. I'd like to ask you to be responsible for building, 10,000, for building 10,000 arrows. So this is a business. I hope you won't refuse." 3 days is enough, said Zhuge. He also agreed to receive death as a punishment if he failed to complete the order. Zhou marked that Zhuge was looking for self-destruction. On the one hand, Zhou ordered his troops not to provide Shu with materials to make the arrows. He also sent Lu Su to see how Zhuge was dealing the problem. In fact, Zhuge had already realized that this was a plot. Uh, he asked Lu Su, to lend him 20 boats, each lined with straw scarecrows and manned by 30 soldiers. He also requested that Lu not tell Zhou what was happening. When Lu come again to see Zhuge, he didn't find anything unusual. Nothing happened on the second day either. In the early morning of the third day, Zhuge invited Lu Su for a boat ride. The 20 boats were tied together with strong ropes, and Zhuge's fleet sailed toward the camp of Cao Cao, who was the king of the Wei kingdom. A thick mist had spread over the surface of the river. People could hardly see each other on the river. When Zhuge's fleet got close to Cao's camp before dawn, Zhuge ordered his soldiers to shout and beat drums to fake an attack. Zhuge and Lu Su simply sat inside one of the boats and drank wine to enjoy themselves. So as soon as the Cao camp heard the shouting and the drum beating, they mistook it for a surprise attack by the Zhou's camp. Since they could see nobody on the river, they gathered 3,000 bold men and ordered them to shoot arrows. the front of the scarecrows was quickly shot full of arrows. After a while, Zhuge had his fleet turned around to expose the other side of the scarecrows. When this side was also shot full of the arrows, the day broke. Zhuge ordered his soldiers to return to their base port. The soldiers shouted, "Thank you, Cao, for your arrows." After they got back to their camp, they collected more than 10,000 arrows from the scarecrows. So this really shows the intelligence of Zhuge. So next story, please.
I think we actually would finish these other two stories next class because this
Yeah.
class is they're taking a bit too much time. So next up is the street. We will finish these stories. We will put these stories into the slides for the next class. So the next our next up is the Three Kingdoms period.
Now, the Three Kingdom period is a period of Chinese history where there were, as the name suggests, three kingdoms that fought each other following the demise of the Han Dynasty. In 25 CE, that is 25 years after the birth of Christ, the Han Empire had been reestablished as the East Han. However, the East Han was not a powerful empire and it fell into chaos. And in 220 CE, the emperor ceded the throne to Cao Pi, who is the son of his generalissimo, Cao Cao. And a generalissimo is basically like head general or supreme commander, what have you. And thus began the Wei Kingdom, which lasted from 220 to 266. But its effective range was only in northern China. Two other Han generals also made themselves emperors. They took over regions of western and southern China. The Shuhan Empire, which lasted from 221 to 263 CE, was in Sichuan, and the Wu Empire lasted from 222 to 280 south of the Yangtze River in present-day Nanjing. Next slide. Now here's a map of China in 229 CE. As you can see, there are three major states at this period: Wei, Han, and Wu. Now, the Wei conquered the Shuhan in 263, 264. But 2 years later, Sima Yan, who is now known as Di, one of the Wei generals, took over the throne and proclaimed the Jin dynasty. And though the Jin did unite the country, the dynasty soon fell apart and the country disintegrated into chaos. The Three Kingdoms survived for roughly 60 years, which is not a very long period. And they didn't really add to the arts, but they did have some clay puppets. So dramas were promoted in this age. But this period is important to the arts as a subject matter. For example, one of the most famous classics in all of Chinese history is known as 三国演义, or Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it details the short and bloody era of warfare and political struggles. The Jin Dynasty. The Jin Dynasty was in 317, and they basically crossed the south of the Yangtze River. And at the time, Sima Rui established the Eastern Jin Dynasty at Jianye. In 383, during the battle with the Western Jin Dynasty at Qin Shuifei. Take note, there are two different dynasties here. The Eastern Jin defeated the Western Jin with fewer troops and therefore unified the country for a short period. And people north and south of the dynasty vastly increased the productivity and technological advancement near the Yangtze River. However, in 420, Liu Yu established the Liu Song, and the Eastern Jin dynasty fell. After this, Chinese history again splintered, and we now have 16 kingdoms in the northern and southern dynasties.
Yeah, Eric, you can continue in the next slide.
兰亭续集 兰亭续集 is the full text of the Lantin preface in 28 lines, 324 words. It describes the charming and elegant, with the words being exploited, the rhythm like a dance and made by the help of God and the people. It has been regarded as the best of the book circles of the later dynasties. Mi Fu, a master of the calligraphy in the Song dynasty, called it the first calligraphy in China.
in the creation of the Sui dynasty. During year 589, after 350 years of disorder from the three kingdoms, an army general called Yang Jiang controlled northern China and proceeded to conquer southern China as well. The united of the two regions and General Yang pronounced himself as emperor. Yang was revolutionary because he set up a new system called bureaucracy, which involves Yang's personal selected officials to govern the dynasty. The officials were chosen based off how well they did the job instead of choosing the powerful family descendants. He created a civil service examination which was used to test who works well in the government, which turned away unskillful officials who did not serve well. The Sui rulers always wanted to expand to more places, thus they created many armies and constructions to satisfy their needs. One of the most famous constructions will be analyzed on the next slide. The Grand Canal. During the Sui dynasty, Emperor Yang, a tyrant, wanted a faster way to transport goods across China to his capital city, Beijing. He also wanted a way to help his army navigate from northern China to the Mongols. The Grand Canal construction began in year 605 to satisfy the tyrant's need. This canal went from Hangzhou to Beijing, connecting the Huanghe River and Huai River. This construction process took over 6 years in the making and is 1,100 miles long. During the 6-year process, many farmers, enslaved citizens, and criminals were forced to work on the canal. Over 2.5 million people died due to the harsh working conditions, overworking, and diseases. This canal was used for over 500 years until later dynasty added more routes to the canal.
So the significance of the Sui dynasty. So this dynasty was known for unifying China after the period of disunion. And the period of disunion is basically started after the fall of the Han dynasty. And during this time, China was divided and different kingdoms were warring for control for over 350 years. And the Sui dynasty is a short but very significant time period because some of the accomplishments that Emperor Yang and Wen during this period did was reunifying China, setting up a national government, a bureaucracy, as Jeffrey said, and also building the Grand Canal, and also rebuilding the Great Wall, as well as feeding people during a famine. Next slide, please. And so how the Sui dynasty came to an end was basically the government put really heavy taxes because they were making a lot of construction projects. So China went bankrupt during this period. And Emperor Yang also enlisted millions of people, for example, the Grand Canal, for his projects. And lastly, he also had a reputation for being a cruel and iron-fisted ruler, which means that he was very strict. And this made him unpopular among the people. And in addition to all of these reasons, there's a Korean kingdom called Goguryeo, which was also at war with China because they didn't pay tribute to Emperor Yang. And Yang tried 3 different invasions, I should say invasions, not imitations, but which all failed, and it continued to cause more bankruptcy. And people became really angry at Yang for his heavy taxes, his forced labors, and his failed battles, which eventually led to him being assassinated or killed by his advisor. And eventually Li Yuan with his clan captured the city of Xi'an to begin the next dynasty, which is the Tang dynasty.
Thank you, the history group. And now we'll move on to the science, biology. Do biology want to share their screen, Allison, or
do you like the
Allison, are you able to share a screen or just mine or add more?
I can share.
Okay, great.
Okay, I guess I'll go. So today we'll be teaching you guys about ecology.
So first, we're going to start with organism, which is a single individual. Organisms are made up of cells, and it can be a plant, animal, bacteria, or more. They can react to changes, they grow and adapt to their environment, and many organisms living together make up a population.
So a population is all the members of one species in one specific area. And some important key terms is population size is the number of individuals, and population density is the number of individuals per unit area, and species are made out of populations. So if you see in the two pictures at the bottom, populations are basically the same fish and the number of them.
Okay. So a community is how organisms interact with each other within an area. One example of this is like the food chain. So at the bottom are the producers, which are like any plants such as trees or like grass. And then the one above producers are primary consumers, which are the animals who like eat the plants, such as like raccoons, bunnies, or like deers. And then above the primary consumers are the secondary consumers who eat the primary consumers, such as snakes and foxes. And then at the very top are the tertiary consumers, which eat both the primary and the secondary consumers, such as bears and then wolves.
And then there is ecosystem. So an ecosystem is a group of living organisms that live in a certain environment and interact with each other. They're made up of organisms like trees, animals, plants, and insects, and they interact with each other in many ways to keep the ecosystem from dying. And there are also many different types of ecosystems. Like you see on the right, there are rainforests, forests, grasslands, deserts, and mountains. And different ecosystems have different animals living in it, and they all function differently. For example, a rainforest ecosystem will have many types of birds, some monkeys, jaguars, and different types of frogs.
This is our website page, and yeah, we're done. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
Okay, now the chemistry, could you share your screen?
Yeah, I can do that. Is Olivia here yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I can share my screen. All right.
All right, hello. So this week our lesson is going to be on stoichiometry. It's pronounced stoichiometry. So first of all, we need to know how to read a periodic table first. We're getting into stoichiometry, so that's just a basic picture of the periodic table. You might have learned it before if you watched our previous videos. All right, so if we look closely at each block on the periodic table, there's four important things to look at. So first, if we go from top to bottom, the top is called an atomic number. If you look on the periodic table, it goes in order. So like the first row goes like 1 and then 2. And then the second row goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It always goes left to right in an increasing order. It tells you how many protons are in the atom. And from 1 or 2 lessons ago, we described what protons were. Then the second one is the element symbol. The abbreviation of it, we mentioned that a little bit when we talked about reactions in the first lesson. And then underneath that is the full name of the element. So for example, on the picture on the right, that would be oxygen, and the short version of it would be O. And then at the bottom, the last thing is called an atomic weight. So basically, if you were to see how heavy you were, this is like we're looking at how heavy an atom is or this element, but since it's really small, we can't use grams to measure it. We use a special unit called AMU. And there's a very complicated conversion factor from AMU to grams.
All right. So now we can go on to the math side, which is what stoichiometry is all about. So what is stoichiometry? Well, stoichiometry is the study of the amounts of different substances for a chemical reaction. Stoichiometry is important because it helps to predict the amount of products for a chemical reaction if you know the amount of reactants. It can also do the opposite. If you know the amount of products for a chemical reaction, you can predict or you can find the amount of reactants that you used to make that chemical reaction. For example, we can use stoichiometry to find how much CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a gas, how much CO2 is produced when we burn sugar. As you can see in the image, if you heat sugar, it will burn and release a gas called CO2. So with stoichiometry, we can find how much CO2 we will release if we have a certain amount of sugar, say like 1 or 2 grams of sugar. All right, so continuing on, frequently we use stoichiometry to find the ratio between the amount of products to the amount of reactants. For example, as I mentioned before, when we burn sugar, the chemical reaction is that middle image right there, the long equation that says C6H12O6 plus 6O2 with the arrow, meaning it produces 6CO2 and 6H2O. Using stoichiometry, we know that if we have 1 mole of sugar, sugar is C6H12O6, then we can produce 6 moles of CO2, the carbon dioxide gas. So the ratio would be 6 moles of CO2 to over 1 mole of sugar. Therefore, we can calculate the number of moles of CO2 if we burn some amount of sugar. Real quick, to define what a mole is essentially a large amount of atoms. So we learned that atoms are small groups or small atoms or molecules, sorry. So 1 mole is a lot of molecules or atoms. So yeah, when I say 1 mole or 6 moles, that just means a lot of six groups of CO2 and 1 group of sugar. And so that is how you can use stoichiometry to find the amount of products or the amount of reactants. And these are our sources. That is all for today.
Okay, that's the end of our class. If you have any question, feel free to type them in the chat. If not, you can leave now. You can stay on if you have any other question. Otherwise, have a great day. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.